"Don't leave me alone with my dad," said the 8-year-old girl to her mother as she was leaving for work. Suspicious. The mother decides to hide inside the house and discovers something that sends a chill down her spine. Merritt Thorne's fingers hesitated over the send button, her other hand clutching her phone with unnecessary force. The text was simple enough. "Running late at the hospital. Traffic's terrible. Be there in 20. But like everything involving Kevin these days, even a simple delay required careful wording. Too casual, and he'd cite her irresponsibility. Too formal, and he'd file it away as evidence of their strained communication. She pressed send and glanced at Winter through the rearview mirror. Her daughter sat unnaturally still in the back seat, small fingers tracing patterns on her lunchbox, the same circular motion, over and over. Merritt had noticed these repetitive behaviors emerging over the past few months, little echoes of Kevin's influence that made her stomach twist. "Sweet pea, you okay back there?" Merritt asked, keeping her voice light despite the heaviness in her chest. Winter's fingers stopped their circular dance. In the mirror, Merritt watched her daughter's face shift through micro-expressions, something else she'd been doing lately, as if testing each reaction before settling on one. "Mom, do I have to go?" The question hung in the air as Merritt pulled into their driveway. The late October sun cast long shadows across their modest craftsman home, painting everything in premature twilight. Their neighbor, Mrs. Chun, was carefully arranging Halloween decorations, each plastic pumpkin precisely spaced. She waved, and Merritt returned the gesture automatically, her mind still processing Winter's question. "Honey, it's your regular weekend with Dad. He's been planning please." Winter's voice cracked, something raw bleeding through her usually careful composure. "Don't leave me alone with him." Merritt's hand froze on the gear shift. She turned slowly, fully facing her daughter. Winter had Kevin's striking green eyes, but where his often held calculated intensity, hers were wide with something that made Merritt's maternal instincts scream. "Winter has Dad." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Has something happened at Dad's house?" Winter's lower lip trembled. "He's different when you're not there." "Not," she struggled, showing a vocabulary sophistication that Merritt hadn't noticed before. "Not angry different. Just watching different." Merritt's phone buzzed. "Kevin, traffic cleared on Milton Avenue 4 minutes ago." "Etienne?" Of course he'd been tracking traffic patterns. She could picture him in his meticulously organized home office, multiple screens displaying traffic apps, weather reports, probably her hospital's shift schedules. The image triggered a memory. Finding him at 3 a.m. during their marriage, surrounded by spreadsheets analyzing her overtime hours, color-coded by department and severity of cases. "Winter, I need you to tell me exactly what you mean by watching different." Her daughter's fingers resumed their circular pattern on the lunchbox, but her eyes held steady. "He has a special room now, with lots of papers and pictures. Of you, mostly. He makes me help him organize them sometimes. Says we're building a case for the truth." She swallowed hard. "He makes me write down everything we do at your house. Every time you're late. Every time you look at your phone. He has special notebooks just for that." Merritt's phone buzzed again. "Kevin, Winter has dance class tomorrow. She needs adequate rest. Please respond." The pieces were falling into place. Winter's recent reluctance to keep a diary, her obsession with being exactly on time, the way she'd started arranging her toys in perfect lines. Little reflections of Kevin's compulsions, growing stronger with each visit. Merritt made a decision. "Sweet pea, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to text Dad that you're not feeling well. Then he'll want proof." Winter interrupted, sounding far older than 8. "He always wants proof now. Then we'll give him proof." Merritt pulled out her phone, snapped a picture of Winter's pale face, and sent it with a message. "Winter's running a fever. Taking her to urgent care to be safe. We'll keep you updated." The response was immediate. "Which urgent care? I'll meet you there. Have compiled a list of her symptoms from the last 72 hours. Attached PDF of her temperature fluctuations this month." Merritt's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "New plan," she whispered, more to herself than Winter. We're going home. But I need you to trust me about something. Okay? Winter nodded, her fingers finally stilling on the lunchbox. We're going to pretend I left for work. I need to see. Merritt trailed off, realizing she needed to protect Winter from the full scope of what she suspected. I need to understand what's been worrying you. As they pulled into their garage, Merritt's mind was already racing through the logistics. She'd call in a favor from Adira to document everything legally. She'd need cameras, recordings, evidence. She almost laughed at the irony. Here she was, preparing to document and collect proof, just like Kevin. But where his obsession stemmed from a need to destroy, hers came from a desperate need to protect. Winter's small voice broke through her planning. He'll know, Mom. He always knows. Merritt turned off the engine and turned to face her daughter fully. Not this time, sweet pea. This time we're going to be smarter. She brushed a strand of hair from Winter's face, noting how her daughter instinctively straightened it to match the other side. But I need you to be brave and tell me everything. Every single thing that feels wrong when you're with Dad. Can you do that? Winter's eyes darted to the house, then back to Merritt. He has a chart, she whispered. A big one with all your mistakes. He makes me help him find more. Her voice dropped even lower. He says once we have enough, I'll live with him forever. And you'll be alone. Just like you left him alone. Merritt felt a chill run down her spine, even as her resolve hardened. She pulled Winter into a tight hug, feeling her daughter's racing heart match her own. Through the garage window, she could see Mrs. Chun still arranging her Halloween decorations, each plastic pumpkin casting long shadows that seemed to point directly at their home. Merritt had always prided herself on being observant. It was what made her a good nurse. But she'd missed the patterns emerging in her own home, in her own daughter. Not anymore. Let's go inside, she said softly. And then Mom's going to make some very important calls. As they walked into the house, Merritt's phone buzzed one final time. Kevin, compiled list of recommended urgent care facilities within 10-mile radius. Ranked by wait times and pediatric expertise. Arriving at highest ranked in 15 minutes. Expect full report on Winter's condition. Merritt silenced her phone and locked the door behind them. She had 15 minutes to set their plan in motion. 15 minutes to start collecting evidence of her own. 15 minutes to begin understanding just how deep Kevin's obsession ran. She just prayed it wouldn't be too late. Merritt's training as a pediatric nurse had taught her to prepare for emergencies with methodical precision. Now, those same skills guided her through the next crucial hours. She'd helped Winter settle in the living room with her favorite books, positioning her away from windows, before beginning her own careful investigation of their home. The first camera went above the kitchen counter, angled to capture the main living space. The second, disguised as a phone charger, was placed in the entryway. Merritt's hands remained steady as she worked, even as her mind raced through the implications of what she was doing. Recording devices in her own home, it felt like stepping into someone else's life, someone else's story. Her phone had accumulated 27 notifications from Kevin. She opened them in chronological order, each message more elaborate than the last. Called Dr. Richardson's office. No record of Winter's check-in. Checked cameras at 3 nearest urgent care facilities. No visual confirmation of arrival. Analyzing Winter's last video call for signs of emerging illness. Will forward findings. The timestamp on the last message was 3 minutes ago. Merritt screened a call from him, watching as another voicemail notification appeared instantly. She connected her phone to a recording device Adira had rushed over, ensuring every communication would be documented. Winter's voice drifted from the living room. Mom? Dad's calling again. Merritt found her daughter staring at her own phone. Safety device Kevin had insisted on providing. The screen showed 7 missed calls. Let it ring, sweet pea, Merritt said, sitting beside Winter and pulling her close. Remember what we talked about? Today is about understanding. Winter nodded, but her fingers had resumed their circular pattern, this time on the phone's case. He's going to be mad about the charts. What charts, honey? The ones in his special room. He calls it his evidence library. Winter's voice took on a mechanical quality, as if reciting from memory. Every Thursday, we update the charts. Red markers for big mistakes, blue for small ones, green for suspicious patterns. Merritt felt her throat tighten. And what counts as a mistake? Being late, taking phone calls during dinner, having male nurses on your shift. Winter's fingers moved faster. Last week, he added a whole new chart because you bought organic milk instead of regular. He said it shows. She scrunched her face in concentration. Fiscal irresponsibility and unstable decision-making. The doorbell rang, causing them both to jump. Merritt checked the security camera feed on her tablet. Mrs. Chan stood on their porch, holding what looked like a casserole dish. "Stay here," Merritt whispered to Winter, moving to answer the door. Mrs. Chen's usual smile seemed strained. "Merritt, dear, I saw you come home early and thought you might need dinner." She lowered her voice. "Kevin called. Said Winter was sick. He's quite concerned. Mentioned something about hospital protocols for fever management." Merritt accepted the dish, her mind racing. Of course Kevin would start calling neighbors, building his narrative. "Just a slight fever," she said carefully. "I'm monitoring it at home." Mrs. Chen's eyes darted past Merritt into the house. He seemed very specific about which urgent care you should be at. Even quoted some statistics about pediatric care standards. She hesitated. "Merritt, is everything okay?" Before Merritt could respond, her phone buzzed with another message. This one made her blood run cold. Accessing hospital security feeds from last 3 months. Documenting all male interactions during shifts. "Will present findings at next custody review." "Everything's fine," Merritt said, forcing a smile. "Thank you for dinner." As she closed the door, Winter appeared in the hallway. "He's checking the cameras again, isn't he? He shows me sometimes. All the hospital videos. He makes me count how many times you talk to Dr. Evans." Merritt's hand tightened on the casserole dish. Dr. Evans, the pediatric surgeon she worked with almost daily. She'd never mentioned him to Kevin. "Winter, sweetheart, I need you to tell me more about these videos. Does Dad have access to the hospital security system?" Winter shook her head. "He has a friend. Someone who can get anything. He calls him his truth finder." She paused, then added in a smaller voice, "Dad says he's finding all your secrets, so we can save me from them." Merritt's phone lit up with a new message. "Meeting with PI tomorrow. Discussing expansion of surveillance parameters. Winter's safety is paramount. Private investigator." Of course. Merritt closed her eyes briefly, remembering the odd feeling of being watched during her last few shifts. The unfamiliar cars in the hospital parking lot. She dismissed it as paranoia, a mistake that now seemed monumental. "Mom," Winter's voice quavered. "There's something else. About the special room." Merritt knelt down to her daughter's level. "What is it, sweet pea?" "Sometimes, when he thinks I'm sleeping, I hear him in there, talking to the pictures of you, making plans." Winter's fingers found their circular pattern again. "He has this big calendar, with dates marked in red. He calls it the countdown." Merritt's phone buzzed continuously now, Kevin escalating his attempts at contact. Through the kitchen window, she could see Mrs. Chan on her phone, probably talking to him. The net was tightening. "Winter, I need you to be very specific. What kind of dates? What's he counting down to?" Winter's green eyes, so like Kevin's, yet so different, filled with tears. "The day he wins. The day he takes everything from you, just like you took everything from him." She swallowed hard. "He has it all planned out. Every single detail. He says that's the only way to make things right." Merritt pulled her daughter close, feeling her small body trembling. Through the window, she watched as more neighbors began appearing on their porches, phones in hand. Kevin's network expanding, his narrative spreading. Her own phone displayed a final message. "PI confirms irregularities in your hospital records. Meeting with lawyers tomorrow. This ends now, Merritt. Everything ends now." Merritt held Winter tighter, her mind racing through scenarios, escape routes, contingency plans. She'd thought she was prepared for what she might discover today. She'd been wrong. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This wasn't even about revenge. This was about obsession in its purest form, methodical, relentless, all-consuming. And it was only beginning. The first indication that Kevin's plan extended beyond their immediate circle came at precisely 7:43 a.m. the following morning. Merritt was reviewing security footage from the previous night when her supervisor, Dr. Catherine Shaw, requested an immediate video conference. Merritt, I've received concerning reports about potential HIPAA violations. Dr. Shaw began, her typically warm demeanor replaced by professional distance. Someone submitted detailed documentation suggesting you've been sharing patient information outside the hospital. Merritt maintained her composure, though her hand tightened on her computer mouse. What documentation, specifically? Photos of you apparently discussing cases on your phone during breaks. Timestamps, location data, correlating patient admission records. Dr. Shaw paused, consulting something off-screen. The source seems meticulously thorough. Merritt recognized Kevin's methodology immediately, the same precise attention to detail he'd once applied to real estate developments, now turned against her professional life. Catherine, I need to explain something about my current domestic situation. Before she could continue, her email chimed. The hospital's HR department requested her presence for an immediate review. Simultaneously, her phone lit up with a message from Kevin. Accountability begins with professional integrity. Winter deserves a mother who respects boundaries. Winter, who had been quietly drawing at the kitchen table, looked up. Did he start the work part? She asked, her voice small but knowing. He said that would be first. Because it's where you feel safest. Merritt turned to her daughter, noting how Winter's drawings were arranged in perfect symmetry on the table. What else did Dad say about my work, Sweet Pea? He has a whole timeline. Color-coded. Winter's crayon moved in precise strokes. First the hospital, then the apartment, then your friends. He says isolation is necessary for reformation. Merritt's phone buzzed with another message from Kevin. Meeting with hospital board at 2 p.m. Bringing comprehensive evidence of professional misconduct. Winter's future requires decisive action. The systematic dismantling of her life had begun. Merritt initiated her countermeasures. First, a call to Adira Patel, who had anticipated this move. I've already drafted a preliminary injunction, Adira informed her. Kevin's pattern of behavior suggests calculated harassment. We can use this against him. Next, Merritt contacted Dr. Sage Blackwood, the child psychologist who had been quietly documenting Winter's behavioral changes. We need to accelerate our timeline, Merritt explained. Kevin's escalating faster than anticipated. Winter watched these calls with unusual intensity, her drawings becoming increasingly geometric. Dad has a chart just like this, she commented, pointing to her precise patterns. He calls it the dominance matrix. Every box is a piece of your life he has to control. Merritt's email inbox filled with meeting requests from hospital administration. Through her home's security cameras, she observed unfamiliar vehicles passing by with increasing frequency. Kevin's surveillance network expanding, his influence spreading through her professional world like a carefully engineered virus. Winter, Merritt said carefully, I need you to tell me more about Dad's plans for my work. Every detail you can remember. Winter set down her crayon with deliberate precision. He has files on everyone. Dr. Evans gets a red folder because Dad says he's a primary threat. Nurse Rodriguez gets yellow because she covers for your breaks. Even the cafeteria lady has a folder because she lets you take extra coffee sometimes. Merritt's phone displayed a new message from Kevin. Hospital board very interested in your relationship with Dr. Evans. Surveillance footage suggests inappropriate professional boundaries. Winter deserves better role models. The pieces aligned with devastating clarity. Kevin hadn't just been watching her. He'd been mapping her entire professional ecosystem, identifying every connection, every potential vulnerability. The hospital investigation was just the first domino in an intricately arranged sequence. He has all these business cards, Winter continued, her voice taking on the flat tone she used when reciting Kevin's lessons. People who can help him restore order. Private investigators, journalists, hospital administrators. He calls them his correction team. Merritt's security system alerted her to another slow drive-by, this time capturing photos of her house. Simultaneously, her email notified her of an anonymous complaint to the nursing board. Accompanied by hundreds of pages of documented concerns, she thought of Kevin in his evidence library, surrounded by charts and photographs, meticulously plotting the deconstruction of her life. Each attack precisely timed, each accusation carefully crafted to seem credible in isolation. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, all professionally documented. Mom, Winter's voice pulled her back. There's something else. About the hospital part. She hesitated, aligning her crayons into perfect rows. Dad says once you lose your job, I'll have to live with him, because you won't be able to support me anymore. He has it all planned out, which room will be mine, which school I'll go to. He says it's inevitable. Like gravity. Merritt's phone displayed a final message from Kevin. Initial meeting with hospital board successful. Wheels in motion. Remember, Merritt, you taught me about loss. Now I'm teaching you about consequences. Through her window, Merritt watched another unfamiliar car pass by, its occupant clearly photographing her house. Her professional reputation, carefully built over years of dedicated service, was being systematically dismantled by the same meticulous attention to detail that had once made Kevin a successful developer. But as she observed Winter's drawings, precise geometric patterns that echoed Kevin's obsessive documentation, Merritt realized something crucial. His very thoroughness, his need to control every detail, might be his undoing. Because while Kevin was focused on destroying her piece by piece, he was leaving his own pattern of behavior in every carefully crafted attack. Her phone lit up with another hospital meeting request, but Merritt was already reaching for her laptop. It was time to show Kevin that he wasn't the only one who could document patterns. Dr. Sage Blackwood's office presented a deliberate contrast to Kevin's rigid world. Soft lighting replaced fluorescent precision, and comfortable furniture stood at intentionally imperfect angles. Yet Winter gravitated to the most structured corner, where a dollhouse waited with its rooms perfectly aligned. Winter has been arranging the furniture with increasing precision, Dr. Blackwood noted, observing as the child adjusted a miniature chair to match an exact angle. She displays a marked increase in compulsive ordering behaviors, particularly when discussing her father. Merritt watched through the observation window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The past week had brought escalating pressure at work, 3 separate disciplinary reviews, multiple complaints from mysteriously concerned colleagues, and a pending board investigation into her professional conduct. Watch this, Dr. Blackwood directed, entering the therapy room. Winter, shall we try something new today? Winter looked up from the dollhouse, her fingers still adjusting a tiny table. Is it time for documentation? The phrase sent a chill through Merritt. Dr. Blackwood maintained her professional composure. Actually, I thought we might draw today. Would you like to show me your house? Winter selected her materials with methodical care. Ruler, protractor, precisely sharpened pencils. Which house? Mom's house or Dad's evidence library? Whichever you'd like to share. Winter began drawing with architectural precision. Dad's house has to be exact. He checks the angles. Her pencil moved in measured strokes. The evidence library is the most important room. That's where we do our important work. What kind of work? Dr. Blackwood inquired, noting Winter's increasing tension in her shoulders. Documenting Mom's mistakes. Dad says it's like building a case for justice. Winter's drawing took shape, a room with walls covered in precise grids. Every grid square has to be perfect. Dad says imperfection is what destroyed our family. Merritt's phone vibrated, another email from hospital administration. This one detailed a formal review of all her patient interactions over the past 6 months. She silenced it, focusing on her daughter. Winter, can you tell me about these squares? Dr. Blackwood pointed to a particularly detailed section of the drawing. That's the timeline wall. Dad keeps track of everything there. Winter's voice took on a recitative quality. Blue marks are for schedule violations. Red marks are for male interactions. Yellow marks are for suspicious behavior. Green marks are for potential endangerment. And what counts as endangerment? Winter's pencil paused. Last week, Mom ordered pizza because she was tired after her shift. Dad said that shows negligent meal planning and exposure to unnecessary delivery personnel. She resumed drawing, adding meticulous detail to the grid. It got 3 green marks because the delivery person was male. Dr. Blackwood made a note in her file. How does it make you feel, helping your dad with these marks? Safe, Winter answered immediately. Then softer and scared, her pencil moved to a new section of the paper. This is where Dad keeps the surveillance photos. He has categories for them. Work misconduct, social infractions, parenting failures. Through the window, Merritt watched as her daughter recreated Kevin's obsession with photographic accuracy. Each detail of the evidence library emerged in perfect scale, the multiple monitors tracking Merritt's movements, the filing cabinets labeled with dates and infractions, the wall-sized calendar marking countdown dates. Winter, Dr. Blackwood said gently, you mentioned feeling scared. Can you tell me more about that? Winter's pencil slowed. Sometimes, late at night, I hear Dad in the library. He talks to the pictures of Mom, makes plans. Her hand trembled slightly, disrupting a line. Immediately, she reached for her eraser. He says he has to make everything perfect. That's why he hired the people to follow her, to document everything. He says once we have enough documentation, the judges will understand. Merritt's phone lit up again. This time a message from Kevin. Winter misalignment on her morning toast. Suggests deteriorating standards in your household. Adding to negligence file. Dr. Blackwood observed Winter meticulously redrawing the erased line. How do you feel about these people following your mom? Dad says they're necessary. Like antibodies fighting an infection. Winter switched to a ruler, measuring the angle of her lines. He has their reports in special folders. Color-coded by threat level. She paused, then added in a whisper. Sometimes he makes me read them before bed. Says I need to understand the importance of documentation. Merritt pressed her hand against the observation window, fighting the urge to rush in and gather Winter in her arms. Her daughter's therapy sessions were revealing the full scope of Kevin's obsession, not just with destroying Merritt's life, but with forcing Winter to participate in the destruction. One more question, Dr. Blackwood said, noting Winter's increasing focus on perfectioning every line. What happens if something isn't documented correctly? Winter's hand stilled completely. Dad says mistakes contaminate the evidence. And contaminated evidence ruins the plan. Her voice dropped even lower. Last week, I forgot to record what Mom was wearing during drop-off. Dad made me stay in the library for 3 hours, practicing observation techniques. Merritt's phone displayed another message from Kevin. Noticed Winter's shoelaces were asymmetrical at last pickup, documenting parental neglect of basic presentation standards. Dr. Blackwood concluded the session, but Winter remained focused on her drawing, adding minute details to the evidence library. Each stroke of her pencil revealed more of Kevin's systematic obsession, the charts tracking Merritt's every move, the surveillance schedules, the color-coded filing system documenting every perceived transgression. As Merritt prepared to collect her daughter, Dr. Blackwood pulled her aside. This goes beyond traditional parental alienation, she stated firmly. Kevin's obsessive documentation and forced participation in surveillance activities constitute emotional abuse. Winter's increasing display of compulsive behaviors is a direct response to his conditioning. Merritt nodded, watching as Winter meticulously packed away the drawing supplies, aligning each pencil to perfect parallels. Can you document everything? For the court. Already begun. But Merritt? Dr. Blackwood hesitated. His pattern suggests escalation. The more evidence we gather against him, the more desperate his documentation might become. Merritt's phone lit up with a final message from Kevin, reviewing Winter's therapy sessions. Notice concerning lack of structural discipline in Dr. Blackwood's office. Investigating her professional background for potential negligence patterns. The systematic destruction of Merritt's life was expanding to include anyone who might help her. But as she watched Winter carefully straightening the dollhouse furniture one last time, Merritt realized they'd gained something crucial: documented evidence of Kevin's psychological manipulation, recorded by a professional witness. Now they just had to survive his reaction to being documented himself. The incident at Winter's parent-teacher conference marked a critical escalation in Kevin's systematic campaign. Ms. Eleanor Feinstein, Winter's third-grade teacher, had arranged the meeting to discuss concerning changes in Winter's academic performance, particularly her increasingly rigid approach to assignments. Merritt arrived early, finding Winter's latest mathematics test displayed on Ms. Feinstein's desk. Every calculation was written with mechanical precision, but the margins contained something more revealing: elaborate tracking systems monitoring the exact time spent on each problem. Winter has developed an unusual preoccupation with documentation, Ms. Feinstein explained, indicating the marginal notes. She refuses to submit any assignment without recording multiple data points about her completion process. Kevin arrived precisely on schedule, carrying a leather briefcase filled with his own documentation. "I've prepared a comprehensive analysis of Winter's academic performance," he announced, extracting color-coded folders. "I've identified concerning patterns in her homework completion rates since living primarily with her mother." Ms. Feinstein attempted to redirect the conversation. "I'm actually more concerned about Winter's emotional state. Yesterday, she experienced significant distress when another student disturbed her perfectly aligned pencils. Proper organization is essential," Kevin interjected, producing a graph. "I've tracked the correlation between structural discipline and academic success. Winter's performance metrics clearly declined during her time with Merritt." The discussion shifted dramatically when Ms. Feinstein presented Winter's latest creative writing assignment. The story, titled The Watching Room, described a father's obsessive documentation of his ex-wife's activities, told through the eyes of a frightened child. Kevin's reaction was immediate and severe. "This assignment represents unstructured thinking. It requires immediate correction." He began pulling out more documents: photographs of Merritt's house, detailed schedules of her work hours, transcripts of recorded conversations. "Mr. Thorne," Ms. Feinstein interrupted, "this level of surveillance documentation is highly irregular. Everything must be documented," Kevin insisted, his carefully maintained composure showing cracks. "Merritt's influence is corrupting Winter's understanding of proper methodology. Look at these infraction patterns." As Kevin spread more surveillance photos across the desk, Winter entered the classroom for her portion of the conference. Upon seeing her father's documentation displayed, she froze, then began arranging her father's papers into precise geometric patterns, her hands shaking. "Winter has an assessment rubric for today," Kevin announced, reaching for his briefcase. "We need to document her responses for the evidence library." The term evidence library triggered an immediate response in Winter. She began reciting dates and times of Merritt's supposed infractions, her voice taking on a mechanical quality. Ms. Feinstein watched in growing concern as Winter's behavior shifted to mirror her father's obsessive documentation patterns. Merritt attempted to intervene. "Winter, sweetheart, you don't need to dash." "Interference with documentation protocols," Kevin interrupted, making a note in his ever-present logbook. "Merritt consistently undermines structured observation requirements." Winter's distress escalated as she struggled to maintain her father's demanding documentation standards. When she misaligned one of the papers, her anxiety peaked. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'll fix the angle. Please don't make me stay in the library tonight." The implications of this statement caused Ms. Feinstein to immediately contact the school's counselor and Child Protective Services. Kevin's response was to produce additional folders of evidence, including detailed analyses of Winter's behavioral patterns at both households. Merritt observed as the school officials documented Kevin's behavior, noting his obsessive need to control and record every aspect of the conference. His carefully constructed facade began to crack under professional scrutiny, revealing the extent of his psychological manipulation. The meeting concluded with the school counselor requesting immediate psychological evaluation for Winter and expressing serious concerns about Kevin's influence on her development. Kevin's response was to begin documenting everyone present, adding their names to his ever-growing surveillance network. As they left the conference, Merritt received a message from Kevin. School staff now added to investigation parameters. Their interference will be thoroughly documented and addressed. Winter walked beside Merritt, her steps carefully measured. "Dad's going to add this to the timeline wall," she whispered. "It's going to take up a lot of red squares." Merritt's phone buzzed with another message, this time from Dr. Blackwood. School report received. Documentation of Kevin's behavior during conference provides crucial evidence of psychological abuse. Moving forward with emergency custody modification. The parent-teacher conference had become a turning point, providing official documentation of Kevin's obsessive behavior from multiple professional sources. His need to control and document had finally begun to work against him, creating a record of his psychological manipulation that couldn't be ignored. As Merritt drove home, she noticed fewer surveillance vehicles than usual. Perhaps Kevin was too busy documenting the school staff to maintain his usual observation protocols. It was a small break in his perfect system, but it suggested something crucial. His obsession might finally be spreading too thin to maintain. The systematic investigation into Kevin's business dealings revealed a pattern that extended far beyond his obsession with Merritt. Detective Rowan Hayes presented her findings in Merritt's living room, spreading documentation across the coffee table, while Winter was at her court-mandated therapy session. Kevin's real estate developments show the same pathological need for control, Detective Hayes explained, indicating financial records spanning the past decade. He manipulated business partners through elaborate documentation schemes, creating evidence of misconduct that never occurred. Merritt examined the records, recognizing Kevin's methodical approach. Each failed partnership followed an identical pattern: meticulous documentation of perceived infractions, systematic isolation of the target, and carefully orchestrated professional destruction. Former partner James Chen lost his architectural license due to Kevin's fabricated evidence. Hayes continued, "The documentation was so thorough that investigators initially believed Kevin's claims of professional misconduct." Merritt's phone displayed a message from Dr. Blackwood. Winter showing signs of severe anxiety during today's session. Expressed fear about contaminating father's documentation systems. The detective produced more files. "We've uncovered similar patterns with 3 other business partners." Kevin's obsession with documentation served as both weapon and shield. He created paper trails so complex that victims struggled to defend themselves. Merritt recognized the strategy. "He's doing the same thing with my hospital records, creating a narrative through selective documentation." "Exactly," Hayes confirmed. "But here's where it gets interesting. His obsession leaves its own trail. Every manipulated document, every fabricated piece of evidence, shows the same precise patterns. It's like a fingerprint of psychological manipulation." Merritt's security system alerted her to movement outside. Through the cameras, she observed 2 unfamiliar vehicles performing Kevin's standard surveillance rotation. Her phone buzzed with his message, "Noticed unauthorized visitors at your residence." Documenting potential conspiracy patterns, Detective Hayes outlined their strategy. "We're building a case showing how Kevin's documented evidence against you mirrors his previous patterns of manipulation. The consistency of his methodology actually works against him." The detective's phone lit up with an urgent message. Kevin had begun investigating her background, attempting to discredit her involvement in the case. His predictable response pattern provided additional evidence of his systematic approach to destroying perceived threats. Merritt received another message from Dr. Blackwood. "Winter drew the evidence library again today. Detailed expansion plans suggest Kevin's documentation systems are growing." Expressing concern about new targets, Hayes spread out photographs of Kevin's previous victims, business partners, colleagues, even his former therapist. Each case file demonstrated his evolution from successful developer to masterful manipulator, using documentation as both weapon and justification. "His pattern is escalating," Hayes noted, indicating timeline analyses. "Each new target faces more elaborate documentation systems. With you, he's reached unprecedented levels of surveillance and record-keeping, Merritt's phone displayed surveillance photos Kevin had submitted to the hospital board, each meticulously annotated with supposed evidence of misconduct. His obsession with documenting her infractions had expanded to include every person she interacted with professionally. Detective Hayes assembled the evidence into clear patterns. Kevin's business success was built on the same methodical destruction we're seeing now. He didn't just document failures. He engineered them through careful manipulation of evidence. Merritt's security system registered another alert. Kevin had expanded his surveillance perimeter, adding new observation points around her neighborhood. His message followed, documenting increasing pattern of suspicious meetings. Adding to custody violation evidence. The detective's findings painted a clear picture of Kevin's progression. Each successful manipulation reinforced his methodology, feeding his obsession with documentation and control. Merritt represented his most ambitious target, a complete systematic dismantling of someone's personal and professional life. Hayes received confirmation that Kevin had begun investigating the judge assigned to their case. His predictable pattern of attacking potential threats through documentation provided additional evidence of his psychological manipulation. Merritt's phone displayed a final message from Dr. Blackwood. Winter's latest session reveals escalating anxiety about father's documentation requirements, expressing fear about new people in the files, requesting emergency custody hearing. The evidence painted a clear picture. Kevin's obsession with documentation and control had evolved from a business strategy into a psychological weapon. His methodical approach to destroying perceived threats now provided a documented pattern of manipulation that could be used against him. The next step was clear. They needed to present their findings before Kevin's obsession claimed new victims among those trying to help Merritt and Winter escape his influence. Kevin's facade of control began to fracture precisely as Dr. Blackwood had predicted. The evidence presented by Detective Hayes triggered an unprecedented escalation in his documentation obsession. His carefully maintained professional demeanor dissolved into increasingly erratic attempts to maintain his narrative. The hospital administration received an unprecedented volume of documentation from Kevin, each file revealing more of his psychological deterioration. Dr. Catherine Shaw contacted Merritt directly after reviewing the latest submission. He sent 300 pages analyzing your coffee breaks, Dr. Shaw explained during an emergency meeting. The level of detail suggests disturbing surveillance protocols. He's documented the exact angle of your cup placement during staff meetings. Merritt received simultaneous alerts from her home security system. Kevin had increased surveillance rotation to hourly intervals, each observation meticulously recorded and submitted to his expanding evidence collection. Detective Hayes confirmed the pattern through her investigation. He's sacrificing sleep to maintain his documentation requirements. Business associates report him arriving at dawn to review security footage, searching for any interaction you have with male colleagues. Winter's therapy sessions with Dr. Blackwood revealed the intimate impact of Kevin's deteriorating condition. During her latest session, Winter demonstrated the expanding scope of her father's obsession. The evidence library has new rooms now, Winter explained while creating another precise architectural drawing. Dad says we need more space for all the proof. He's added special sections for everyone who helps Mom. Dr. Blackwood's professional assessment became increasingly urgent. Kevin's compulsion to document has evolved into a severe manifestation of his control issues. He's now targeting anyone who threatens his narrative. Merritt's colleagues began receiving elaborate dossiers detailing their interactions with her. Nurse Rodriguez discovered a 50-page analysis of her break room conversations with Merritt, annotated with supposed evidence of conspiracy. Kevin's message to Merritt reflected his increasingly unstable state. Documentation proves systematic corruption in hospital administration. Timeline reveals coordinated effort to conceal professional misconduct. Winter's safety requires immediate intervention. The situation reached a critical point during a scheduled visitation exchange. Kevin arrived carrying multiple recording devices and a new ledger dedicated to documenting Merritt's appearance. His hands shook as he attempted to measure the exact distance between Merritt's car and the curb. Everything must be recorded precisely, he insisted, his usually controlled voice rising. The evidence must be perfect. The documentation must be complete. Winter, watching from Merritt's car, began arranging her schoolbooks in parallel lines, mirroring her father's increasing agitation. "Dad's going to need new color codes," she whispered. "The old ones don't cover everything anymore." Detective Hayes documented the exchange from a distance, adding it to their growing evidence file. His compulsion is overwhelming his ability to maintain his professional facade. The pattern suggests imminent psychological breakdown. Kevin's deterioration accelerated when he discovered Dr. Blackwood's official psychological assessment of Winter. His reaction manifested in a 100-page rebuttal, analyzing every word of the report with obsessive precision. Merritt received his message late that night, investigating Dr. Blackwood's entire career. Evidence suggests coordinated attempt to undermine documentation protocols. Adding new wing to evidence library for psychological conspiracy documentation. Dr. Blackwood's response was immediate. Kevin's fixation on documentation has reached critical levels. His inability to maintain professional appearances suggests the system he created is consuming him. The evidence of Kevin's psychological state mounted as his behavior became increasingly erratic. His business partners reported him converting office spaces into evidence storage, walls covered with photographs and tracking charts. Winter's next therapy session revealed the extent of his deterioration. "Dad doesn't sleep in his bedroom anymore," she reported. "He stays in the library talking to the pictures. He says he's close to proving everything. He just needs more evidence." Detective Hayes confirmed Winter's observation through surveillance reports. Kevin's obsession has overwhelmed his daily functions. He's approaching total psychological breakdown. Merritt's security system captured Kevin conducting midnight documentation sessions, measuring and photographing every aspect of her home's exterior. His messages became streams of numerical data and color codes. The systematic destruction he had planned for Merritt was instead revealing his own psychological unraveling. Each new piece of evidence he created further documented his deteriorating mental state. Dr. Blackwood's final assessment was unequivocal. Kevin's compulsive documentation has evolved into a severe psychological condition requiring immediate intervention. His behavior poses an escalating risk to Winter's emotional well-being. The storm of Kevin's obsession had broken, revealing the fragility of his carefully constructed control. His own evidence was becoming the strongest testimony against him. The legal confrontation crystallized during a supervised visitation session at the County Family Services Center. Kevin arrived carrying multiple recording devices and a newly expanded documentation system, his deteriorating psychological state evident in his increasingly rigid behavior protocols. The court-appointed supervisor, Dr. Elena Martinez, observed as Kevin attempted to implement his standard documentation procedures within the confined space. His hands trembled noticeably as he positioned recording equipment at precise angles, measuring distances with obsessive attention to detail. Winter must maintain proper documentation standards, Kevin insisted, producing a new set of observation forms. The evidence collection cannot be compromised by supervised limitations. Winter's response to her father's behavior provided crucial documentation for their case. When Kevin presented his standard observation checklist, Winter exhibited severe anxiety symptoms, immediately beginning to arrange the room's furniture in parallel lines. "Winter," Kevin instructed, his voice carrying an edge of desperate control, "document Mother's recent infractions according to established protocols." Winter's resistance to participating in his documentation system marked a significant shift. "I don't want to record anymore, Dad," she whispered, her hands still automatically straightening objects on the table. "The evidence library scares me now." Kevin's reaction to this deviation from his established patterns proved particularly revealing. His carefully maintained facade cracked completely as he produced extensive files documenting Winter's previous compliance with his observation protocols. "The documentation must be maintained," he insisted, his voice rising as he spread papers across the visitation room floor. "Every interaction requires proper evidence collection. The system cannot survive without complete data integration." Dr. Martinez intervened when Kevin began attempting to measure Winter's sitting angle with architectural tools. Her professional documentation of the incident provided additional evidence of his psychological deterioration. Detective Hayes, monitoring the situation, noted Kevin's increasing inability to maintain his previous methodical approach. His documentation system, once a tool for controlling others, had evolved into a compulsion that now controlled him. Merritt received urgent messages from both Dr. Blackwood and Detective Hayes during the visitation. The psychological assessment team recommended immediate suspension of Kevin's visitation rights based on his exhibited behaviors. Winter's reaction to her father's deteriorating condition proved especially significant for their case. During the visitation, she demonstrated clear awareness of the harmful nature of his documentation obsession. "Dad keeps saying he needs more evidence," she confided to Dr. Martinez after Kevin's extended attempt to document her posture adjustments. "But the evidence library isn't about proving things anymore. It's about making everything stop changing." Kevin's final message to Merritt that evening revealed the extent of his psychological unraveling. Documentation protocols compromised by supervision requirements. Evidence collection incomplete. System integrity requires immediate restoration of unrestricted observation parameters. The supervised visitation had provided crucial evidence for their case, documenting Kevin's inability to maintain appropriate boundaries and his damaging influence on Winter's psychological well-being. His own compulsive need to document everything had ultimately revealed the severity of his condition. The courtroom proceedings commenced with an unprecedented display of evidence documenting Kevin's psychological deterioration. Judge Eleanor Richardson presided over a case that would establish new precedents regarding psychological manipulation and parental alienation. The prosecution presented their evidence systematically, beginning with Dr. Sage Blackwood's comprehensive psychological assessment of Winter. The documentation revealed the profound impact of Kevin's obsessive behavior on their daughter's development, including detailed analyses of her increasing anxiety and compulsive tendencies. Detective Hayes provided extensive documentation of Kevin's pattern of systematic manipulation across both personal and professional spheres. Her presentation included testimony from former business partners, establishing a clear progression of Kevin's documented behavior patterns. "The evidence demonstrates a consistent methodology," Detective Hayes testified, presenting meticulously organized case files. Mr. Thorne's obsession with documentation evolved from a business strategy into a severe psychological condition that poses significant risks to his daughter's well-being. Kevin's response to the proceedings proved particularly revealing. He appeared in court surrounded by multiple recording devices and documentation materials, attempting to maintain his elaborate system of evidence collection even during the hearing. His inability to remain present without documenting every aspect of the proceedings necessitated multiple judicial warnings. Dr. Martinez presented her observations from the supervised visitation sessions, providing professional documentation of Kevin's deteriorating ability to maintain appropriate boundaries with Winter. Her testimony included detailed accounts of his compulsive need to measure and record every aspect of their interactions. The turning point came during Winter's testimony, conducted via closed-circuit television to protect her emotional well-being. Her description of the evidence library and her father's escalating documentation requirements provided compelling evidence of psychological manipulation. "Dad's pictures and charts aren't about helping anymore," Winter testified, her hands automatically arranging papers on the desk before her. "They're about making everyone stop moving, stop changing. He wants to freeze everything in his special rooms." The court-appointed psychological evaluation team presented their findings regarding Kevin's mental state. Their assessment documented severe obsessive-compulsive tendencies exacerbated by underlying abandonment trauma, manifesting in increasingly dangerous control behaviors. Kevin's own testimony served to reinforce the prosecution's case. His inability to address the court without referring to his extensive documentation system demonstrated the severity of his psychological condition. When questioned about his surveillance activities, he produced elaborate charts attempting to justify his behavior through meticulous data collection. Judge Richardson's ruling reflected the overwhelming evidence of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. The court ordered immediate suspension of Kevin's parental rights pending completion of intensive psychological treatment. Additional provisions required Kevin to maintain significant distance from Merritt's residence and workplace. The significance of the ruling extended beyond immediate custody arrangements. The case established important precedents regarding the recognition of systematic psychological manipulation as a form of abuse, particularly in cases involving parental alienation. Merritt received the court's decision with measured relief, understanding that the legal victory represented only the beginning of a longer healing process for Winter. The systematic destruction Kevin had planned for Merritt's life had instead documented his own psychological unraveling, creating an irrefutable record of his deteriorating mental state. 1 year following the court's ruling, Merritt observed the profound changes in their lives from the sunlit breakfast nook of their new home. The systematic documentation of their healing process, maintained now by Dr. Blackwood, reflected significant progress in Winter's recovery from her father's psychological manipulation. The transformation manifested in subtle ways. Winter's school assignments no longer contained the rigid documentation patterns that had characterized her previous work. Her artwork, displayed prominently on the refrigerator, showed increasing freedom of expression, the precise geometric patterns gradually yielding to more fluid, creative designs. Dr. Blackwood's latest assessment noted substantial improvements in Winter's emotional well-being. The compulsive behaviors have diminished significantly, her report indicated. Winter demonstrates increasing comfort with unstructured activities and natural variations in daily routines. The court-mandated therapy sessions with Kevin proceeded under careful supervision. His progress, while measured, showed signs of addressing the underlying trauma that had fueled his obsessive documentation. The evidence library, as reported by his treatment team, had been systematically dismantled as part of his therapeutic process. Merritt's professional life had stabilized following the hospital board's formal acknowledgement of Kevin's manipulation. Dr. Catherine Shaw's official statement cleared Merritt's record of all manufactured allegations, recognizing them as products of Kevin's psychological campaign. Detective Hayes maintained appropriate monitoring of Kevin's compliance with court orders. Her reports confirmed his adherence to distance requirements and communication restrictions. The surveillance vehicles that had once maintained constant observation of Merritt's residence were replaced by official periodic welfare checks. Winter's recovery process included carefully structured visits with Kevin, supervised by Dr. Martinez in a therapeutic setting. These sessions focused on establishing healthy boundaries and communication patterns, gradually replacing the rigid documentation requirements with appropriate father-daughter interactions. The support group Merritt established for parents affected by psychological manipulation and parental alienation grew steadily. Her experience provided valuable insights for others navigating similar situations, while the group's success offered her a constructive channel for processing their ordeal. Dr. Blackwood's final assessment of Winter's progress noted remarkable resilience. The intensive therapeutic intervention has facilitated significant emotional healing, she documented. Winter demonstrates appropriate age-level behaviors and healthy attachment patterns with both parents. The systematic destruction Kevin had intended for Merritt's life ultimately led to transformation and healing. The detailed documentation of their recovery process, maintained now through appropriate therapeutic channels, told a story of resilience and restoration. Merritt received periodic updates regarding Kevin's progress in treatment. His therapy team reported gradual acceptance of appropriate boundaries and recognition of his harmful behavioral patterns. The obsessive documentation that had consumed his life yielded to structured therapeutic interventions. Winter's artwork evolved to include family portraits showing both parents in appropriate proportion and relation. Her therapeutic progress indicated healthy integration of her experiences, replacing the rigid patterns of her father's influence with age-appropriate creative expression. The supervised visits with Kevin continued according to court-mandated schedules, each session documented by professional observers rather than Kevin's elaborate systems. Winter demonstrated increasing comfort with these structured interactions, free from the burden of compulsive documentation. Merritt's professional focus expanded to include advocacy for improved recognition of psychological manipulation in family court proceedings. Her experience informed institutional changes in handling cases involving parental alienation and obsessive documentation behaviors. The healing process, while ongoing, demonstrated the resilience of both mother and daughter in overcoming systematic psychological manipulation. Their story provided valuable documentation for other families navigating similar challenges. offering hope for recovery and renewal. As Merritt observed Winter preparing for school, arranging her backpack with natural care rather than compulsive precision, she recognized the profound significance of their journey. The systematic documentation that had once threatened to destroy their lives now served as testament to their healing and growth.